I guess this might be a good starting point in conversation talking about Asian and Pacific Islanders. Real quickly, I just wanted to point out, along with Dr. Sang, if you notice the labels in 1890, they changed, and this is a convincing argument that race is actually a social construct, right? How many of you, how many of you today would walk around and say, hell yeah, I'm hell optimally? Probably not, right? But these were the terms used by people. And you notice one of the key things I want to point out in this classification or these categories is that from 1890 to 1950, the census people came around and they chose the race for you. So if they looked at you and you thought that you passed for a particular kind of race, that's what they were going to mark you. Yeah? And that says a lot about, how racial classifications or how people allow or have the ability to put you into a particular box. When I think of race as something, an idea that's fixed. You can thank eugenics of the 1930s for helping us to think about racial classifications as something that is genetically and biologically fixed, which means they don't change, right? And that's why when we have stereotypes about racial groups, that's why they're hurtful and that's why they're racist, is because it's under the presumption that they don't evolve, that they don't change. We've kind of fixed them into some kind of biological understanding. But we all know in this room, biological variation, right? It grows, but even people's thoughts and ideas and who they are also change as well. There was a recent finding, I don't know if you guys came across this. There was a recent finding about, they found some old skeleton of a man in Spain, and geneticists were able to determine that this European was black-skinned with blue eyes. And so now they're going to try and figure out, and you can imagine at that time, almost 4,600 years ago, what was the racial classification for this person? I don't think they called themselves European at that time, right? But someone that was completely black, or what we socially construct as the color black, with blue eyes, right? You can imagine what kind of category would this person be. But a lot of the science behind that is they're trying to figure out how did they become pale white, right? So it's very, Dr. Singh is correct that there's so much tension over the battles over race and ethnicity. And partly it's because the kinds of results and the experiences that come from identifying with a particular racial group. You can imagine that in the 1940s, if you were living in the southern part of the United States and you identified as black, yeah, I bet you probably lived every day of your life in fear. Or in the 1880s, if you identified yourself as Chinese, you can imagine the kind of fear that you were living under, right? And then Congress makes race real in 1882 by creating the Chinese Exclusion Act, right? Kind of the first time that race becomes a legal matter, right? And a social matter. I'm going to move away from that because I want to talk about this racial category, Asian and Pacific Islander. So how did I get into this work? This year I'm going to finally, when I raise enough money, because damn, tuition's hella expensive, right? All of you can feel me on that. So when I raise the money, I'm going to be able to file my dissertation. Then I'll be a hella legit PhD, ethnic studies. Hopefully I can do that by the end of this fall. And a lot of my work focuses on how islanders use their culture to navigate the education system. Now, if anyone just thinks about Pacific, what's funny is that every time I start a class at City College of San Francisco, I purposely sit in the middle of the class. So students are filing into the classroom, and I'm sitting amongst the desks. Okay, I'm not usually at the front, right? And it's so funny because the kinds of conversations that I would have with students, I'll be like, hey, how are you? Are you taking this class? Yeah, I'm taking this class. And so who do you think's taking the class? And they'll be like, I don't know, it's probably some anthropologist, he's white or something. They have no idea that I'm the actual teacher of the class. So they'll say things like, oh yeah, I mean, it might be a lady, or who knows, it might be some, and I Kid you not. I've heard some students say, it just might be a dumb islander that will probably teach it. Does that hurt? No. But it tells me a lot about people's social thinkings and social ideas about who islanders are. Now, let me just ask you this one thing. This term Asian Pacific Islander. Well, wait, quickly. So that's how I got into this work. I did my undergraduate, my bachelor's degree at the University of Washington in Seattle in both geography and American ethnic studies. And I became interested in doctoral work and scholarship because there were no classes about who I was, no classes on my culture. And people always, and I noticed that universities, institutions like the government and like colleges and schools lumped me under Asian American. But I myself did not grow up identifying as Asian American. I identify myself as an indigenous Samoan or native Pacific Islander. It wasn't until I come to the United States, to Seattle, that I kind of learned about the two groups being lumped. But I think all of us in this room can agree that the two groups in racial terms are pretty much very different. So I'll get into a little bit more about that. So I'm not a health expert like Tao and Dr. Sang, so I don't do anything on health, although I should, so I can learn more about my health.
Join us.
But this is a joint lecture because I do teach. I now teach at City College of San Francisco. We're in the formation of creating the college's first critical Pacific Island Studies program. It is a movement. It's not something that was just born. I didn't just like wake up one day and say we're gonna do that. But it's been a continuous movement since the 1960s, since islanders were migrating to the United States along with other Asian American communities, and them getting here immediately lumped under Asian America. And it's been this constant push by islanders themselves to reclaim or reassert themselves under a different racial and political category, which we now know or use today as Pacific Islander. So I do identify myself as Pacific Islander, but I also identify with other racial and ethnic groups because we have very similar social and political issues that we're working on. All right, what I'm going to do from my portion of the talk is I want to go over the geography, where I know that, Dr. Sen was talking earlier about how to understand race as social or biological. Geographers, I have to say, have another very unique perspective on race. And hopefully I'll probably touch the surface of that here. What I'm going to need is, you don't need a laptop, but you do need something to write on. I'm going to give you a map. The first thing I'm going to cover in this half of the presentation is to look at the geography of the Pacific. And you probably learned that the Pacific is not only about Hawaii, yeah, like how Americans commonly think, yeah? So I'll just probably take a map. So the courses that I do teach at City College of San Francisco is Introduction to Critical Pacific Island Studies. And the term critical was something that the community, particularly islanders in San Francisco, added to that program. And part of the reason why they added the term critical is to kind of separate itself in part from the work of anthropologists who's kind of dominated on the scholarship on Pacific Islanders since the 1950s. So here in the United States diaspora, you'll see a movement. I'll talk a little bit about the movement of Pacific Islander students in higher education trying to carve academic space for the study and the cultures and the cultural studies of Pacific Islander or indigenous native Pacific Islanders here in the United States. I was also part of this movement here when I was a student at Berkeley as a doctoral student. I've also been a part of that movement at the University of Washington. So me being a part of those projects has definitely shaped the kind of work that I do today. So I hope I covered that portion, Dr. Sang. Okay, let's look at this map of the Pacific. And I know for sure, rarely ever do we concentrate or at least look seriously into a map of the Pacific. Anyone, this class, can you point out anything interesting things that you see on this map? Anything that stands out?
I think the Federated States of like Micronesia really stands out to me. I mean, I remember from another presentation there was like, you know, a graph, and then it would list all the ethnicities, and like Micronesian was listed as one. I was like, what the hell is like Micronesian, you know?
I know.
So that's interesting.
What's your name?
Peter?
Hey, Peter, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, you have to think about how we get these names like Micronesian, and then Polynesian, and then Melanesian. And it warrants a very critical discussion because these terms, my communities and the people, Pacific Islanders themselves have kind of internalized these labels. These are labels that have been introduced and imposed, just like racial categories, imposed from the outside, and then over years embraced, socialized amongst the community, and then they embrace it. And now it's so funny, now that I know the history of the term Micronesian, and I hear my friends who identify under this term, I just can't help to think like, damn, small island, that's what you would call yourself, right? We're gonna get into the translation. Here, I saw her hand raised here. What's your name? John? Hello?
I thought it interesting that like Guam and American Samoa are in there because people always think of Puerto Rico when they think of US territory, but they never think of those places are technically the United States.
Yeah, and it's interesting because these two island groups, these two territories or colonies of the United States, were also swept up in the late early 1900s during the Spanish and American War, in which the United States also acquired Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, Hawaii, Guam, and American Samoa.
Just one other thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't actually know what the Taiwanese Aborigines would be classified
That's an interesting, yeah.
because they're very close to
Islanders.
China, but at the same time, ethnically speaking, they're close to the island.
Right. Okay. What's your name?
Justin.
Hey, Justin.
It's also really interesting because I have a lot of friends that are Filipino and they identify as Pacific Islanders,
Cool.
but you don't
Yeah,
see
we're
them
always
on the
talking
map.
about that, yeah. Cool. Yeah. No, it's an issue I take up heavily in my Pacific Studies courses at City College. And I think really it's thinking about, again, not these racial categories as something that's fixed, but try to think of them as open, no borders, they're very fluid. So people come and go in those identifications, yeah? Another hand raised here. What's your name?
Khan.
Hey, Khan.
The majority of these islands are claimed as like territories of like large powers.
Very good. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Yes.
Most don't use
What's your name?
Fele
Hey, Fele.
Kubarasa. Most don't use the name that
Lisa.
Islanders would,
Good.
would identify themselves by, like the Cook Islands.
Right. Definitely. Good. Anything else? Okay, so let me just say something. There's kind of an irony here because the people here in the United States, the people would identify themselves as Pacific Islander. But if you look at the map itself, one would only pay attention to these specks of land. But rarely ever, and I think this is part of the things that we learn being in Western Academy or Western culture, we don't ever think about the ocean as part of that identity formation, right? And so it's kind of an anomaly and an irony that we say Pacific Islander, yet the geography of the Pacific, or this place, does not only include just the islands, but also includes the water, and for most indigenous cultures in the Pacific, the sky. So sky, land, and ocean are all one and the same. But on this map will kind of force you to look at the national names and the borders and the boundaries. Yeah? So in this case, in this sense, I would love for us, and what I always try to teach my students who take my courses, is to think of ocean, our ocean, not so much as dividing islands or separating islands, but think of ocean as connecting them, yeah? So ocean as a connector rather than a divider. And in Western culture, we get the sense that the ocean is something that's out there, something that disconnects us. California is separated from Hawaii by an ocean. But really, we should say California is connected to Hawaii by ocean. Yeah, so we want to change the view here. So I'm going to quickly get off because Tal's next. Yeah? I just want to go over some of the regions. I want to quickly go over the regions and then probably cover some of the indigenous names of these places. So if you take your writing utensil on your map, just make a mark up here. Okay? What is that place? What is that place? Okay, so I hear everyone says Hawaii. Okay? That's Hawaii, right? The pronunciation of this place is Hawaii. So everybody repeat after me. Hawaii.
Hawaii.
Yeah, so you want to, this is how Native Hawaiians pronounce their homeland. And one way that we can revive their culture or show a form of respect is we pronounce the place of their home correctly. Yeah? So when you hear MTV and all those kids at MTV that go to Hawaii for spring break and you say, oh my gosh, I'm in Hawaii, hey. Don't let me catch you on TV doing that. Okay? So you want to, and there's a lot more literature and a lot more things in media about the tourism, the stereotypical things about Hawaii, right? But in this case, in most Pacific Studies classes, we want to learn how to say the indigenous names of these places. Hawaii, everybody, Hawaii.
Hawaii.
Okay, cool. Hawaii is, as you know, our 50th state. Became part of the Union in 1959. The term Hawaii serves as the name or the official name of the state of Hawaii and also the name of the largest island in the Hawaiian chain or the Hawaiian archipelago. The largest island is called Hawaii. It is also the youngest. And the only reason why you know that is because there are still volcanoes. Pele is still alive. My islander sisters are here. Okay. Then if you look at the far north, south, east, west. See, in the ocean, east, west, north, south doesn't matter. Yeah? Then you're going to find an island here called Easter Island. Okay, you want to put a dot there. Anyone know why this place is called Easter Island?
The discoverer landed there on Easter.
Yeah, and discover in like big ass quotations. Okay? Discover. And of course, because Captain Cook came across at Easter Island and he said, oh my gosh, that's my island, Easter Island. Okay, I don't know what the hell he was going, but he did. But the indigenous peoples call this place Rapa Nui. Okay, everybody say Rapa? Nui.
Nui.
Who knows? Extra credit, Dr. Sang, whoever can tell me the translation of Rapa Nui. Good, I don't think you would get it.
No extra credit.
It means great land. Okay, you want to just put the translation there. Great land. But it also means, in different contexts in the Rapa Nui language, it can also mean great sky or great ocean. Okay, so it depends. Rapa Nui can be used either way. It was discovered by Captain Cook for the British, for England, and then now administered by the country of Chile. Okay? You put a dot here. I think everyone knows New Zealand, right? Yeah, everyone knows, we've heard of something about New Zealand. I'm going to give you the indigenous name for New Zealand. Okay? And the British gave this term New Zealand because of their inability to pronounce the indigenous name of this place. Okay, and it is spelled Aotearoa. A-O-T-E-A. Oh damn, sorry. There you go. A-O-T-E-A-R-O-A. Aotearoa. The indigenous peoples there are the Maori. Okay, so I'm going to close this triangle now. And you will too. Okay, that region there. Can anyone guess what that region is? Okay, this region is called Polynesia. Poly meaning many, and Nesia or nest, island. So the French came in and divided the ocean. Okay, at some point prior to European colonization, all these islands did not have national names or national borders. All were connected by ocean and through a navigational culture. Okay, until Europeans come in and start to separate and scoop up these places as if they had already owned them. But the reality is, people have been surviving and building civilizations and cultures in these places for thousands and thousands of years. Okay, here you see Samoa and American Samoa. The translation for Samoa is Sa, S-A meaning sacred, and Moa meaning center. It is the only archipelago or island chain that's divided into two polities, meaning the eastern half of that Samoan chain is an American colony, and the western half of that chain is an independent nation. However, the people who are just 45 minutes separated, 45 minutes connected by water, okay, they are completely two different countries. American Samoa, its citizens, are nationals. They are treated just like American citizens. They can travel back and forth to the United States, while those in Western Samoa, in an American context, would be considered aliens or immigrants. Yeah? But the people are technically the same. They speak the same culture, the same language. All their families are related. Yeah? So let's do this other region real quick. I'm almost done, Tom. Under Japan, you're just going to write from Japan, just a line to Hawaii, and then right underneath Palau here, right below Nauru, and it's connected to that eastern and the western end of that triangle. This region here is what we call Micronesia. Okay, quickly, I'm just going to focus on this island here, Guam. The indigenous spelling of this place is Guahan, spelled G-U-A-H-A-N. Okay, Guahan, G-U-A-H-A-N. The translation means we have. And Guam, some of you didn't know, Guam is home to the largest military base in the United States. Yeah, and currently, right now, indigenous peoples who we don't call Guamanian, but are Chamorro, right, or Taunu'u. Indigenous peoples of Guam have been resurrecting a movement to make Guam independent. Part of it is to repel, or at least contest, the United States under President Obama, is moving soldiers, American soldiers, to a tiny island. If you look at the geography of Guam, more than half of Guam is a U.S. Air Force base. Okay? Can anyone tell me why Chamorros, the indigenous people, would be upset about this? Obama's planning to move at least 20 more thousand soldiers based in Guam. And of course, the threat is North Korea, China, and all this other stuff. He calls his foreign policy the Pacific pivot. Okay? Anyone have any idea why Chamorros would be pissed off about this. Yes,
I would guess encroachment onto land that's been traditionally family land use.
definitely.
Being outnumbered by the military,
Of course.
environmental degradation,
Right,
yeah, political influences.
definitely. Do soldiers come by themselves?
No.
No, they're gonna bring their family, so you can, yeah, you're right. So this is that, the infrastructure, right? But more than that, if the infrastructure doesn't work, right? Can water get to these places? Can you keep a place like this sanitary? It also encroaches, and then also, it also shapes how indigenous peoples see themselves in their own homeland. For the case of most of the Pacific, the indigenous peoples end up being the poorest people in their own homelands. Yeah? Let's look at this bottom region real quick. I just have 1 minute left. I do a more extensive lesson on this. If you want to take classes at City College, we are open. No matter what the media has been saying, okay? We are hella open. Okay, and you don't need to apply like how you apply to Berkeley. You can just sign up, enroll, and then take my class, you know? And education's hella cheap. That's it. Okay, this last region right here is Melanesia. Mela, for the melon in your skin, and it means, a translation of Melanesia is Black Islands. Okay, you know Micronesian is small islands. So French anthropologists, because I don't know if they were called anthropologists at the time that they were venturing the Pacific. I don't think the field of anthropology was even born yet. But nonetheless, these are terms and new identity constructs that have been imposed on these Pacific peoples. You can imagine islanders themselves did not walk around, oh my gosh, there's another Micronesian. But now we do. Now we do. Right? So I want us to think about, when we're thinking about racial categories, and even in this class, racial categories, or ethnic categories, right? I want you to think about how they're imposed, and then what is the result of that imposition? And when I'm talking about the result, what happens to the people? And then the country in which the categories are applied or imposed to these people, what is the social and political script that the government holds for treating a particular group this way? Okay? These are the three regions, three major regions. If you're in the United States and you say the Pacific Islands, we're usually just talking about these three regions here. If you go to the Pacific and there's another term that they use, Oceania. If you use or utter the term Oceania, you're talking about these three regions and two other ones, okay? Australia, and then now the Philippines, okay? So there is a difference between Pacific Islands versus Oceania. If you're using the term Pacific Islands, then you're only referring to the geographic island, okay? The physical environment of the island itself. When you use Oceania, we're talking about sky, ocean, and land. All three of those segments. Okay, so you're talking really deeply about the cultures here of the people. And that is my portion